Welcome back, Seeker. If you found your way to this explainer, chances are you're standing right in the middle of the wreckage of a major life change, right? The ground beneath you has completely shifted, and those structures you used to rely on, they've collapsed. So today, we're not just doing a dry academic analysis of a text. We're using this grim mythic fable as a dark mirror. As we go through this, you are looking directly into the abyss of your own mind. We're going to explore exactly what happens when the old world ends and the new one hasn't even begun to be built yet.
I want you to look deeply into the desolate valley of your own psyche for a second. Just really sit with this question. When the script of your life completely burns away, what rises from the ashes? When external dependency is literally no longer an option and the people or the institutions you always relied upon are just gone, you're left with this terrifying silence. And your internal voice starts whispering, is this all there is? Who am I without them? Well, that right there is our starting point. We're going to trace that exact path from silent despair all the way to a kind of radical self-reliance that, quite honestly, looks a lot like madness to the outside world.
Prologue: The Valley's Tragedy.
So the valley represents your depressed, dependent psyche. It's that place where you feel entirely crushed by external forces. You're suffocating under this heavy feeling of being a victim of your circumstances, basically just waiting for someone else to come and rescue you. Our source text mentions a very specific, incredibly heavy number, 17. It says the explosive man had been buried under 17 generations of ancestral pride. Psychologically speaking, this is the immense, compressed weight of the superego. It's all the expectations, the historical baggage, the generational trauma, and the societal rules you inherited before you even had a say in the matter. It's literally the burden of the past keeping you paralyzed.
Watch how this psychological break mechanically unfolds. It's fascinating. First, centuries of ancestral pressure apply their weight. Then comes the agonizing compression of your own years, where the old way of living just becomes increasingly intolerable. You're suffocating under the expectations of who you were supposed to be. And then, the lava, the sudden eruption. The text says he rose through this weight the way volcanoes rise, slowly, then all at once. That is the exact moment of the break.
Section 2. The Eruption of the Explosive Man. Okay, let's dive into this.
He came out of the lava. Now, the text absolutely insists this isn't just some poetic metaphor, or rather it's a metaphor in the way that all true things are metaphors, which is to say, it's also literally true within the fable. The internal heat of your life change, the sheer destructive force of your transition, absolutely shatters what you used to be. The explosive man rises with an absolute, total indifference to everything above him. All those 17 generations of rules burned away, gone. Because when you go through a true, deep psychological transformation, you just cannot care about the structures you have to break to emerge.
Section 3. The Silence After God. In a godless world, the collapse of objective authority leaves a massive void. And hey, this isn't just about theology. It's about the end of any ultimate objective authority in your life telling you what to do. The silence you hear isn't a pause before the next announcement. It is the announcement. It tells us that the terrible freedom of this world is not a problem to be solved, but a condition to be inhabited. I really want you to internalize this. How do you inhabit a house with no walls? You do it by ceasing to wait for the walls. Freedom is terrible precisely because it means you are entirely responsible for yourself now. You have to stop waiting for the boundaries to return. You know what really provokes deep unease? Competence. It completely unsettles those who have actively chosen helplessness. The exiles around you are just sitting there, waiting for commands. They accuse the self-reliant man of wickedness and unreason simply because he refuses their laws. But most unforgivably, they accuse him of happiness. And I don't mean a thin, borrowed comfort of the temporarily safe. I mean a deep, structural happiness. The kind of happiness of a man who has fundamentally decided that his fate is not something happening to him, but something he is actively doing.
Section 4. Amor fati and dry bones.
Now, what's really interesting about this next idea is that it brings us to a massive psychological turning point, amor fati, the love of one's fate. You see, it's one thing to accept that the world is ruined. It's an entirely different level of existence to actually love the ruins. He loved his dry bones, not despite their dryness, but because of it. Why? Because the dryness was real. The text tells us that the reality of a thing, when honestly confronted, is always far more nourishing than the lie of a thing comfortably ignored. If your life right now is a pile of dry bones, amor fati is the tool that tells you to love those bones, because they are yours and because they are real. He looked at his totally desolate fate and said yes to it. This right here is the pure will to power. The internal monologue shifts from, oh, why is this happening to me, to I accept that this is mine to conquer. In a world without heaven, without some external savior swooping in, yes and no are literally the only two powers remaining. You have to look at the absolute totality of your circumstances, the good, the horrific, the painful, and say yes with full force. He who cannot say yes wholeheartedly hasn't even begun to understand the game.
Section 5. The Comedy of Self-Creation. Listen, this ascent into the domain of the Übermensch, where you officially become your own lawgiver, is absolutely not about toxic positivity. The tragedy was real. The bones were real. The grief was intensely real. The absence of God, the absence of that ultimate safety net, was a wound that did not heal. He didn't pretend otherwise for a second. You absolutely must validate your own pain because your major life change is a tragedy. But it is transformed through a laughter that unnerved his neighbors considerably. You simply stop reading a pre-written script and you begin writing your own.
And this brilliantly illustrates the core shift. Think about it. A tragedy is just a story in which you are subject to forces beyond your control. You're just a victim of the valley. But a comedy? A comedy is the exact same story, the exact same grim facts, but told by someone who has stopped waiting for a different ending and started writing one. You reframe your entire personal upheaval. You permanently shift from being a helpless exile to an empowered creator. The facts don't change at all, but your orientation to them changes absolutely everything.
The valley was unchanged. He was the change. I mean, wow. This is the mythic climax. The external circumstances of your life, your valley, might remain entirely desolate. The economy, the profound loss, the cold physical realities, they might not budge a single inch. But your psyche has entirely transmuted. You are no longer waiting for the valley to magically become a garden. You have become the force of nature within it.
So, Seeker, we've arrived at the end of our analysis, and I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. If the valley will never change, what ending will you start writing today? You have the dry bones. You have the terrible freedom. It is time to stop waiting for commands and step back into your life as the absolute architect of your own fate. Embrace the comedy of self-creation, keep seeking, and we'll see you in the next explainer.